Welcome to the DSS presentation on academic accommodations in our current and evolving university environment. My name is Ann Lazenby and I am the Director of Disability Support Services, and I will let my co-host introduce herself.
I'm Heather Swanson. I'm the UAA Assistive Technology Specialist.
I wanted to start by giving you a brief overview of the kinds of disabilities that students at UAA experience. A lot of people, when they think about disabilities, think about being deaf or blind or in a wheelchair, and yet 65% of the disabilities at the university are not those things. One of the biggest things we see is anxiety, and while this is a diagnosis that can be given to a student with a disability, I think right now a lot of students are experiencing anxiety for a variety of reasons. They may have recently lost their job, their housing, they might be experiencing food insecurity and everything that's happening with the COVID-19 situation. We also see a lot of students with learning disabilities. This can include dyslexia, which affects how a person processes language. It can make reading and writing difficult. Dysgraphia also affects a person's writing ability. Dyspraxia affects a person's motor skills, and that is especially common for typing and writing. And dyscalculia affects a person's ability to do math. We also have seen an uptick in traumatic brain injury. This can affect memory issues. Students often need to reduce the amount of time they spend looking at a screen, whether that's a phone or a tablet or a computer. They can also experience personality changes and have difficulty controlling their impulses. Another high percentage of students have ADD or ADHD, and that's attention deficit disorder, with or without the hyperactivity. This causes students to really struggle with focus, and while they were experiencing that difficulty in a classroom, it may be exacerbated by their experiences at home. They might have kids there, parents there, their job may be operating out of their home now, pets, other websites that they have access to can all impact their ability to focus on their classes. It also, ADHD and ADHD also really depend on routine, and since we've moved to an online environment, their routines have been disrupted, and so that again will impact their ability to focus on their classes.
Another thing that can also impact students at this time is access to classes. They may have limited bandwidth, they may not have internet at home, they may not have the technology. Some students specifically take in-person classes because they aren't comfortable with online, or they just don't have that technology. Maybe they only have their cell phone, they don't have a computer or a tablet. They also might be unfamiliar with the technology. A lot of students have never used Zoom. Some of the students who, again, are in those face-to-face classes have very limited exposure to Blackboard or VoiceThread, etc. So what kind of impacts on learning can that have? Anne, I'm going to let you talk on this one.
So we talked a little bit about the impacts on learning with relationship to the disabilities that we see. Some of the big impacts that we're seeing so far is the information processing and retention. People with anxiety have more difficult time remembering things. Their processing is slowed down. What they're reading, they often have to read multiple times. Their executive functioning is limited. So trying to focus on what's important becomes even more difficult. Again, with ADHD, with some OCD and autism, they often struggle with organization, both with their time and with their space. Again, impacting their routine as we switch from a classroom situation to an online learning environment. Often students are struggling with setting up a new routine of how to attend class, attend to their studies, and get their homework done.
And this also leads into the visual access and the audio access. Blind students may have difficulty accessing PDFs if they're not an accessible format, or videos that don't have audio captions for them, and deaf students also with the videos and so on. If it's not captioned, they do not have access to that in an equal manner. So what does that mean to you as an instructor? In the assistive technology world, we have a phrase called pinning it down. And that means that the information that you're giving out or the technology you're using allows your information to be shared in a perceivable, intuitive, and navigable way. So perceivable meaning that the content is designed so that it can be perceived by a wide range of users, regardless of disability or not. Intuitive, the layout of the course is simple, consistent, and predictable. And right now, with all the chaos going on in the world, that little bit of consistency and predictability is really key for both students and staff and faculty. Navigable. The course navigation does not assume that the student is using a specific device, such as a mouse. The user can navigate the course using a keyboard alone, or with the use of assistive technologies in ways that are equally effective. So what is perceivable? Perceivable means the pacing of the lecture and presentations. Don't talk a mile a minute. I'm completely guilty of that. But leave space for questions and students who may struggle with note-taking or processing and mobility issues. It might take them a moment to hit the button for their mic or to type their questions. Consider asynchronous presentations that students can go back and review. This can also help with bandwidth and connectivity issues if the student cannot get online. If you want to do synchronous presentations, consider recording them for student reference later, or also to allow those who were not able to connect at that time to be able to have the information. Present your content in multiple ways. For example, in a combination of text and video, audio, and image format. Address a wide range of language skills as you write content. For example, spell out acronyms, define the term, and avoid jargon, or if you must use jargon, define it. Give examples and assignments relevant to learners with a wide variety of interests and backgrounds, especially if you're teaching a gen ed class. You'll often have a broad range of majors. You might have a nursing major, an engineer, arts, etc. So get creative with your examples. Lastly, accessibility. Caption your videos, transcribe audio content. There's lots of easy ways to do that if you're creating your own videos. Otherwise, choose videos that already have it. Use large bold fonts on uncluttered pages with plain backgrounds. Avoid fancy or serif fonts like instead of handwriting or Times New Roman. These are especially hard to read if a student is using a phone or a tablet because it's much smaller. So the inaccessibility of the fancy serif fonts makes it even harder. If you have questions about captioning or fonts or layouts, please connect with AIE, Academic Innovations and E-Learning, and they are more than happy to help you. And we'll give you that information later. Finally, use color combinations that are high contrast and can be read by those who are colorblind. So in other words, avoid reds and greens, or light fonts on dark, or light backgrounds and dark fonts on dark backgrounds. Intuitive. Make your instructions and expectation clear for activities, the projects, and assigned readings. You want to use clear, consistent layouts and organization schemes for presenting contents. And again, consistency is really helpful for folks, especially right now. Offer outlines and other tools to help the students learn and let them know what's coming up. For folks who have processing issues, it takes them a few minutes to be ready to get their thoughts in order to be able to help. So if they know that in a few minutes we're going to talk about outlines or options to be flexible, they can have that, start that brain process and be ready to participate. I know that in several of the other webinars from Academic Innovations, they've talked about grading and assessments. So give yourself options on those, be flexible. Can you grade on a 0-75 option? Do you say you currently have a B in the class? And if you continue to show that you're participating, you can still have that B, but you can also still improve your grade. Make videos and other high bandwidth activities optional. Again, be creative. Navigable. This is another important, the final piece of that pin. Assume students have a wide range of technology skills and provide options for gaining those skills that are needed for course participation, but especially in this time of high stress and anxiety for everyone, try to avoid having them learn a new system for receiving information. Structure your headings. Use heading style features built into Blackboard, into Word, PowerPoint, etc., or use the built-in designs and layouts in the slides. Make sure that your content and navigation is accessible. And make sure that your PDFs are designed so that they are accessible. Or you can create an accessible HTML or Word version as the primary source and link it back to the PDF as a secondary source. And here's where I want to make a really key point. There is a difference between accessible and usable. Word is accessible, but it's not always usable for a student. Think about a fill in the blank form. If you have a form that's fillable, the student simply, tabs into the next line, types in their information, and moves on. If it's in Word, oftentimes that blank is just where you've underlined or there's a little line, and then as soon as the student starts to type, it messes up the formatting from there on, and so they spend a bunch of time fixing the formatting. So you want to think about, is my learning outcome that they can format a document, or is it the knowledge that they're inserting? So you want to make it as easy as possible. Use descriptive wording for hyperlinks. For example, the UAA knowledge base or AI&E website, rather than click here. This allows a person with a screen reader to choose if they want to follow that link and to know what that information is. Otherwise, you end up with a click here, click here, click here, click here, and the person has no idea what they're clicking or where, and that can get them easily lost within there and very frustrated. And finally, be descriptive. Provide concise text descriptions of content presented within images. Don't just say image, but rather woman in meadow with dog. Assessing learning. You want to, what are the learning outcomes that are still left? What do you want them to remember 2 years from now versus at the end of the semester, and focus on that? Do you want them to remember the pilot seat was gray with red stripes, or do you want them to remember it's on the left side of the cockpit? Provide a variety of options for demonstrating learning. And again, CAFE and AI&E have some great tools for that. Can they reflect and project? What did you do? What would we have done in a normal semester? Can you write a project proposal? How about writing possible exam questions with answers that target learning outcomes? So check out CAFE and AI&E's webinars. Again, great ways to become creative. For exams, timed exams in both face-to-face and online situations, those present barriers to many students, whether they have a disability or not. When timed exams are used, extended time is a reasonable accommodation for many students. And even online, in this day and age, we still have to follow their accommodations. Accommodations are typically determined by Disability Support Services, and we'll send a notification to you. When you get that notification, you will still need to provide that longer time for the student to take the exam. Provide adequate opportunities to practice, but don't give busy work. People are right now with their stress levels, they don't have time for busy work, but they do need time to practice still, and allow extra time for projects, activities, and tests. Provide feedback during that, offer corrective opportunities, and provide plenty of options for communicating and collaborating that are accessible to individuals with a variety of disabilities. And also realize that group projects may not be feasible right now. And I'm sure that y'all have heard this lots of times. There is no one size fits all. And again, use CAFE as a resource, AI&E, they have great information on that. And do you want to still do the case studies in this?
I muted myself, sorry. Yeah, we can still do them and then just give people the ideas.
Okay. So some ways to think creatively. We have a few case studies that we'd like to share with you. The first one is, Joanne is a student in your class who has a vision impairment. The students have been asked to describe what the data shows on a graph, basically interpret the graph.
So some of the ideas that we came up with, this actually happened in in-person class, and the instructor used basically bedazzled the graph so that it was raised dots on the graph so that the blind student could feel the shape of the graph and what it was doing. So in a non-online environment, that's one approach. You could also give a description of the data points and the graph lines. For example, the graph goes up from the right with time increasing to the left. And another idea is to give the students the raw data to interpret and not use a graph at all.
Dawn is in your online writing class and continually interrupts you while you lecture. Other students have emailed you to complain that they are unable to ask questions during the lecture due to John's behavior.
So some of the ideas we came up for this was using the control on Zoom that doesn't allow people to unmute themselves. So then you are limiting all students' ability to interrupt the lecture. You can also use the hand raising feature on Zoom and in Blackboard, and give guidelines to students and limit the number of questions they can ask during a lecture period, like up to 2 or 3 questions per student.
You've been notified by DSS that Mary cannot look at a computer screen for an extended period of time. You had planned to give timed Blackboard exams.
So one of the easy answers to this is don't give timed Blackboard exams. Use untimed exams where students can take breaks, look away from the screen, and be able to give their brain a break during the exam. You could also measure students' knowledge by giving them a paper to write or a report to do and not give exams at all. And the last idea we came up with was allowing students to answer their questions using an audio or visual recording.
And you may also do an oral exam with this particular student. That's still okay too. Your students are required to post feedback to a question and other student comments using VoiceThread. Marcus is nonverbal, but not deaf.
So for this, we came up with the ideas of allowing for written responses to the prompts. You could also allow all students to respond in their preferred method of communication, whether it's written or verbal, or maybe it's video recording of sign language. It could also be that you allow this student to type their response and then allow someone else to read it into VoiceThread.
Connor has emailed you that he is having difficulty focusing on class material and has requested extra time to complete his assignments.
So there's no hard and fast rule here. It's really going to depend on the situation. You may have seen a letter from DSS that explains how to give reasonable extensions. You could also refer the student to something like the Academic Coaching Center at the Learning Commons, or refer them to DSS. And you can also call DSS and we can help you brainstorm depending on the situation and what's going on. This is where it's really important to have a DSS statement for your class, either in your syllabus or on your Blackboard shell, that says, if you anticipate issues related to the format or requirements of this course, please contact me being the instructor, and we can discuss ways to ensure your full participation in the course. We'll share this statement with you at the end.
So in summary, make things perceivable. Restarting. So in summary, we'll just kind of quick overview of what we've already gone through. Pinning things down, perceivable, content's designed so that it's perceived by a wide range of users, regardless of disability. It's intuitive, meaning the layout of the course is simple, consistent, and predictable. And it's navigable. Course navigation does not assume that the student is using a specific device. Creative, let students get creative in how they show mastery. Again, give them those options. Is it a 3 to 5 minute video, a 5-page paper, build a website? Let them be creative. They will surprise you. I have no doubt of that. Be flexible. While there are some areas that have to be rigid, for example, health and safety areas, that are many areas that do not have to be so rigid. So look at your course and figure out where those areas can give if needed. And grace. Finally, show yourself and your students some grace. It's okay to not be perfect. Some great resources for you. Of course, there's us here at Disability Support Services. You have that DSS statement. Our phone number and email are up on the screen. You have Cafe with their peer-to-peer mentoring and support, amazing group. And of course, Academic Innovations and E-Learning, AI&E, with their webinars and trail guides. All very amazing, wonderful resources for you. And finally, if you have further questions regarding any of this information, please feel free to reach out to Ann Lazenby, our director, and my co-host here, or myself, Heather Swanson, over in Disability Support Services. And here is our information.
Thank you.